The vast auditorium of the Intergalactic Academy of Old Torin, constructed in layers floating like archipelagos in the void, buzzed with debates among a myriad of alien species. Representatives from 50 star systems of all shapes and sizes had gathered to discuss a topic that sparked both fascination and controversy: the human race. At the center of the stage, surrounded by holograms displaying images of Earth, stood Professor Violet, a metallic-skinned Zycon with glowing eyes. "Humans," he began, his voice echoing with gravity, "do not avoid war out of weakness. They avoid it because they have chosen something infinitely more difficult. Strategic restraint." A murmur rippled through the crowd, mixing disbelief and scorn. Coke, a young Sven with luminescent facial markings, abruptly rose from his position in the upper gallery. "They chose restraint," he questioned, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "How can you say that about a species that devastated its own planet in the name of progress? They destroyed entire ecosystems just to feed their growing population. Is that restraint or chaos?" His statement drew murmurs of approval from some and reproachful looks from others. Violet, maintaining his composure, moved to the center of the stage as a hologram of human bombings during World War II floated behind him. "Your confusion is understandable, Coke," he replied calmly. "Humans are a contradictory species, capable of unparalleled destruction and extraordinary reconstruction. And it is precisely this duality that makes them unique. They have the strength to obliterate galaxies, yet they choose something else: responsibility." In the auditorium, some students exchanged puzzled looks. Among them, Vorax, an imposing Kron with a black carapace, leaned forward, his voice rumbling like crushing rocks. "Responsibility? Mercy? Pretty words, but empty. Mercy is a weakness. Hesitate to crush your enemy, and you end up being crushed." His statement drew growls of agreement from some of the more belligerent species present. Violet, however, remained unfazed. "I agree that many see mercy as weakness, Vorax," he said as he replaced the holograms with images of human diplomats negotiating with hostile races. "But for humans, mercy is a strategic choice. They understand that fear is an unstable weapon, one that can turn against its wielder. But trust builds bonds that endure across generations." Coke, still standing, crossed his arms, his facial markings pulsing a deep blue. "And what happens when that trust is betrayed?" he asked, his voice heavy with skepticism. "When those they spared come back stronger, ready to retaliate, do humans simply accept it?" The Zycon professor leaned forward slightly, his eyes glowing with an enigmatic light. "Ah, Coke, therein lies the paradox that defines humans. They know that their choice of mercy is risky. And when their patience runs out, they reveal what I call the other side of restraint." This statement plunged the room into an uncomfortable silence. Even the chattiest students stopped to listen. A young Tulien, with skin as translucent as liquid crystal, hesitantly raised her voice. "Professor Violet, what is this? Other side?" Violet let the silence linger for a moment before answering, his voice now somber. "It means that when forced to fight, humans become the most devastating force the galaxy has ever seen. Because, unlike many species, they do not fight for conquest. They fight to protect, and that is a motivation that knows no bounds." The tension in the room was palpable. Coke, conflicted by his own beliefs, slowly sat down. He didn't know what to think. Violet surveyed the auditorium with a faint smile, satisfied at having planted seeds of doubt. "The true strength of humans is not just in their power," he concluded. "It lies in their wisdom to know when to use it, and when not to." The days following Violet's lecture were marked by growing unease in Coke. He couldn't shake the professor's words, which challenged everything he had learned about strategy and power. How could such a powerful species choose restraint? To Coke, this seemed to contradict the basic instincts of survival. Determined to understand better, he delved into the Academy's vast archives, consulting humanity's historical records. What he found was a web of paradoxes. In one hologram, images of destruction caused by nuclear weapons on Earth showcased the height of human brutality. Yet, Immediately after he saw scenes of reconstruction and global peace treaties, Koch studied the creation of the UN nuclear disarmament efforts and initiatives to uphold universal human rights. They learned from their mistakes, Koch murmured to himself. But do they learn enough? With more questions than answers, Koch decided to seek out Violet again. He found the professor in his office, surrounded by holograms displaying star maps and historical events. "Professor," Koch began, his voice laced with skepticism, "the more I study humans, the less sense they make. Mercy? Reconstruction? Doesn't that make them vulnerable in such a hostile galaxies?" Violet, as if anticipating this visit, leaned forward, a glint of satisfaction in his glowing eyes. "Koch, what you call vulnerability, they call resilience. Humans possess something many species fail to understand: strategic empathy." He activated a hologram showing human soldiers aiding alien civilians after an interplanetary war. They don't just avoid unnecessary conflicts. They build bonds by offering help, even to former enemies. But isn't empathy a weakness? Koch asked, his voice tinged with frustration. How can they trust allies who were once their enemies? Because they understand something crucial, Violet replied. Trust endures longer than fear. And when that trust is betrayed, humans know how to respond. But it's their preference to build rather than destroy that sets them apart. They would rather have an ally than a slave, even if it involves risks. This explanation only deepened Koch's curiosity. He began seeking concrete examples of human alliances. One case caught his attention: the war against the Vren, an expansionist species that had attacked human colonies. Instead of full retaliation, the humans sent emissaries offering a trade agreement that eventually turned the Vren into loyal allies. They traded vengeance for cooperation, Koch reflected. But does that really protect them? Determined to see humans in action, Koch requested a special mission to observe the human fleet. After days of waiting, his request was approved. He was assigned to accompany an observation mission during a military exercise on the edge of human space. Koch knew this would be his chance to determine whether Violet's words were truly accurate. As the Sven ship traversed hyperspace, Koch couldn't suppress his doubts. If they truly balance power and mercy, it will be evident in their tactics, he thought. But a part of his mind still wondered, what if it's all a facade? An illusion to deceive allies and enemies alike? Upon arrival, the sight that unfolded before him was awe-inspiring. The human fleet was a spectacle of organization and power. Warships, frigates, and transports were arranged in precise formations, as if performing a harmonious dance. For the first time, Koch felt the full weight of what human power meant. He was about to discover whether that power was wielded with the control Violet had described, or if it was all just propaganda. Aboard the agile Sven cruiser, Koch observed the human fleet intently. Each ship appeared designed for maximum efficiency, with powerful weapons and robust shields, yet arranged in formations that prioritize coordination and flexibility. They're prepared for anything, Koch murmured, impressed. Still, he struggled to reconcile such power with the notion of restraint that Violet had so highly praised. The military exercise began with a simulated invasion. The human fleet was to face an enemy force represented by AI-controlled ships. When the enemy attacked, Koch expected an immediate and devastating counterattack. But what he saw was something entirely different. The human fleet maneuvered with precision, disabling the weapons and engines of the enemy ships rather than destroying them. They're neutralizing the threat without causing casualties, Koch observed, intrigued. As the humans executed their strategies, Koch noticed something unusual, a pattern. Every move seemed part of a larger plan, anticipating the enemy's actions and creating opportunities for a simulated surrender. They're not just fighting, they're sending a message, Koch remarked, more to himself than to his crew. At the height of attention, the simulated enemy fleet launched a surprise attack, breaking through the human formations. Koch thought he would finally see the humans resort to overwhelming force. Yet, to his surprise, they quickly reorganized their ranks, isolating the invaders and disabling their weapons with surgical precision. Not a single ship was destroyed. They have enough power to annihilate their opponents, remarked one of the Sven officers. Why do they choose to prolong the fight? It's not prolonging, Coke replied, thinking aloud. It's control. They're showing what they can do, without crossing the line. As the exercise continued, Coke received an unexpected communication. A human officer appeared in the hologram, their expression calm yet firm. We know you're here, Sven, the officer said, and we invite your ship to dock with ours for a conversation. We believe we have much to learn from each other. Coke was taken aback. Despite their advanced cloaking technology, the humans had detected them with ease. We will accept, he replied, attempting to mask his curiosity. Upon entering the human command ship, Coke was greeted by an atmosphere of discipline and cordiality. Human officers escorted him to a meeting room where Admiral Ethan Calder awaited. Calder was an imposing figure, exuding authority and calm in equal measure. Welcome, the Admiral said, gesturing for Coke to sit. We understand you were observing. We'd like to explain directly what you witnessed. Coke wasted no time. Why did you avoid using full force? It was a simulation. You could have ended it in minutes. Why prolong the exercise and leave the threat alive? Calder offered a slight smile before responding. Because we don't fight just to win, Coke. We fight to learn and to teach. If we had destroyed everything quickly, what lesson would we have imparted to our crew and allies? We aim to show that power doesn't need to be used in its entirety to be effective. The explanation seemed logical, but Coke still had doubts. What if the enemy doesn't respect this approach? What if they respond with brutality, exploiting your mercy as weakness? Calder's smile faded, replaced by a serious expression. We're aware of the risks, Coke, but we also know that every act of restraint strengthens our network of alliances. We demonstrate that we are strong, but responsible. This earns respect, and when necessary, we are more than capable of using all the force at our disposal. The conversation left Coke deep in thought. He was beginning to understand the human philosophy, but he still questioned whether it could be sustained in such a brutal galaxy. As he returned to his ship, he glanced one last time at the human fleet, feeling there was much more to uncover. They don't avoid war because they fear it, Coke reflected. They avoid it because they understand what's truly at stake. After returning to Sven space, Coke was summoned to his species' war council to report on his observations of the humans. He described the surgical precision, strategic restraint and balance of power and empathy he had witnessed. The reactions, however, were divided. They are brilliant strategists, admitted one veteran general. But their mercy is a weakness that species like the Karlax will exploit. Others, however, began to see merit in the human approach. Coke knew convincing his superiors would be a challenge. While the debate raged on, alarming news arrived. A coalition of aggressive species, led by the Karlax, had mobilized a massive fleet. Their goal was clear: to seize a strategically vital sector near the border of human space. If the Karlax take that sector, they will threaten not only the humans but the entire stability of the galaxy, declared Harak, the Sven admiral. We must act, but we cannot do it alone. The decision was made quickly. A diplomatic delegation would be sent to the humans to request their assistance, and, due to his prior experience, Coke was chosen to lead the mission. This is your chance to prove that your faith in them is not misplaced, said Harak. Coke, though nervous, saw this as an opportunity to demonstrate the true value of human philosophy. Upon arriving at the nearest human base, Coke was greeted by Calder and his team. He explained the situation, emphasizing the severity of the Karlax threat and the risks not just to the humans but to the entire galaxy. Calder listened intently before responding. We've been monitoring the Karlax, but we didn't know they had advanced this far. If what you say is true, we cannot stand idly by. But know this, Coke. Our priority will be to protect lives, not territory. Calder's firm tone surprised Coke. He had expected resistance, perhaps even hesitation to get involved. Yet the humans were ready to act, as long as they could do so on their own philosophical terms. Calder called an emergency meeting with their allies. where representatives of various species debated strategies to counter the Karlaks. Coke watched in fascination as the humans led the discussion without imposing their ideas. They listened, mediated, and guided, demonstrating a diplomacy as strategic as their military approach. Ultimately, a task force was formed composed of human and allied ships, including the Sven. Coke was invited to closely observe the operations, an unprecedented gesture. "We want you to see how we respond to real threats," Calder said, "and, if necessary, to take this experience back to your people." When the task force arrived in the sector, the scale of the threat became clear. The Karlaks fleet was colossal, consisting of bombers, heavy cruisers, and a flagship equipped with a weapon of mass destruction. Coke felt the weight of the situation. The humans will have no choice but to use full force, he thought. But to his surprise, Calder ordered one final diplomatic attempt. A message was sent directly to the Karlaks leaders, offering a chance to negotiate. The response was an immediate attack. Calder's expression hardened, his resolve unshaken. "They've made their choice," he declared. "Now we will make ours." The ensuing battle was a spectacle of strategy and precision. The human fleet, outnumbered, executed maneuvers that destabilized the Karlaks formations, forcing them to split their forces. Coke watched in awe as the humans disabled critical systems on enemy ships, isolating the flagship without destroying it. Every move seemed calculated to minimize damage and conserve resources. The moment of greatest tension came when the Karlaks activated their weapon of mass destruction. The energy buildup threatened to devastate the entire sector. Calder acted without hesitation. "Disable the weapon. Do not allow it to be used," he ordered. When it became clear there wasn't enough time to disarm it manually, Calder made the difficult decision: destroy the ship. The explosion was monumental but carefully controlled to minimize collateral damage to the surrounding space. The flagship was obliterated, and the Karlaks fleet, demoralized, began to retreat. Coke felt a mix of relief and respect. They did what was necessary, but it wasn't an easy decision, he thought. He realized that the humans, even when crossing the line they so often avoided, did so with a moral weight that was rare among any species. After the battle, Calder called Coke for a private conversation. "Did you see what we had to do?" he asked, his voice heavy. "We don't celebrate destruction, Coke. Every decision like this is a loss, even when we win. But when we are forced to act, we do so with the conviction that it is the only path forward." Coke nodded, beginning to fully understand. "You don't avoid war because you fear it. You avoid it because you know the cost better than anyone. And when you face it, you do so with the weight of what it means." Calder offered a faint smile, though weariness was evident in his eyes. "Exactly, Coke. And it's that weight that keeps us human." Following the victory over the Karlaks, the Allied task force returned to their main base to reassess the galactic situation. The battle had been a strategic success, but not without consequences. The Karlaks flagship had been destroyed and their fleet scattered. Yet there were signs of remnants reorganizing in isolated sectors. For the humans and their allies, the war was far from over. Coke, still processing everything he had witnessed, was summoned by Calder for a private meeting. "Coke," Calder began in a measured tone, "there's a lesson in all this that you may not yet have fully grasped. What we did wasn't a display of strength, it was a difficult choice between destruction and preservation. We could have devastated the entire enemy fleet, but doing so would have created a power vacuum that would quickly be filled by something worse." Coke listened closely, recognizing the complexity that went far beyond simple victories or defeats. "But what if the Karlaks returns?" Coke asked. "You limited your response to avoid destruction, but they might use that as a weakness against you." Calder leaned forward slightly, locking eyes with the Sven. "You're right, Coke. They might return, and they always will. That's the reality of the galaxy. Conflict is inevitable. What matters is the legacy we leave for those who come after us. Choosing restraint today isn't weakness, it's strategy. We build trust, protect allies, and ensure that war doesn't spread unnecessarily." During the conversation, Coke realized something deeper. The humans weren't limited by mere idealism. Their restraint was a deliberate decision, grounded in analysis and experience, with full awareness of the consequences of their actions. It's an approach that requires a different kind of strength, Koch reflected. Its moral and strategic strength, as the Allied fleet prepared for further incursions to track down Karlach's remnants, Koch was invited by Lyra to join a humanitarian mission to a colony that had been attacked by the Karlachs. Aboard a supply ship, Koch observed how the humans engaged in reconstruction efforts, distributing resources, and helping the colonists rebuild their lives. Why so much effort for people who aren't even part of your coalition? Koch asked. Lyra, who was coordinating the operations, responded with conviction. Because rebuilding is as important as defending. If we abandon these colonies, we leave room for despair and for new enemies to rise. Besides, by helping here, we show that we don't fight just for ourselves, but for the galaxy as a whole. Koch watched as human soldiers, some still bearing marks from the previous battle, worked tirelessly to restore normalcy to the colony. It was a stark contrast to what he had expected from a military force. During a meeting at the colony, Koch noticed a moment of tension. A group of colonists, distrustful of the humans' intentions, questioned whether the aid came with ulterior motives. "We don't want a new form of occupation," said one of the local leaders. Lyra, however, handled the situation diplomatically. "We don't want to control you. We only want to ensure you have what you need to rebuild. The only thing we ask in return is that you trust our intent to keep the peace." The leader hesitated, but was eventually convinced by Lyra's sincerity. For Koch, it was yet another example of how humans navigated the turbulent waters of diplomacy. Shortly after, reports came in indicating that the remaining Karlach's forces were regrouping in another sector. This time, they were led by a new flagship armed with an even more devastating arsenal, determined to avenge their defeat. Calder convened an emergency meeting with his allies, including the Sven. "We must act quickly," he said, "but we cannot repeat the same methods. We need to neutralize them definitively without leaving room for another threat to emerge." Koch observed as the humans devised a strategy. There was no arrogance or presumption in their words, only determination and pragmatism. Calder proposed a plan to use an experimental energy destabilization device, which could disable the Karlach's fleet without causing massive losses. "It's risky," said an allied commander. "If it fails, we'll be vulnerable." Calder nodded, acknowledging the danger. "But the risk of total devastation is greater if we don't try. True power lies in choosing the best solution, not the easiest one." As the ships prepared for the operation, Koch spoke with some of the human soldiers. He was surprised by their perspective on the challenge. "We fight not because we enjoy it," one soldier said, adjusting their armor. "We fight because we want others not to have to." For Koch, this philosophy was deeply unsettling yet undeniably inspiring. When the operation began, Koch watched closely. The human fleet once again demonstrated its ability to coordinate precise and strategic attacks. The experimental device was activated, and within minutes, the Karlach's fleet was completely disabled. No ships were destroyed, no unnecessary lives lost. Once again, the humans proved that their approach was more than idealism, it was effectiveness. After the mission, Calder gathered all the Allied leaders. "What we accomplished today was more than a military victory," he said. "It was a demonstration that we can face the greatest threats without losing sight of who we are. True strength isn't just about what we can destroy, but what we can preserve." The words resonated deeply with Koch, who was beginning to fully understand the legacy the humans sought to leave behind. With the Karlachs neutralized and their immediate threat eliminated, the human fleet turned its attention to a greater goal, stabilizing the galaxy. Yet, the question lingering among allies and observers was whether lasting peace could truly be achieved in a universe where conflict seemed inevitable. Koch, deeply transformed by what he had witnessed, sought answers as he continued his journey alongside the humans. Shortly after the victory, Calder convened a diplomatic summit with representatives of all species involved in the conflict. "We cannot allow peace to become merely a pause between wars," he declared to the gathered assembly. "Stability requires continuous effort, not just against external enemies, but also against our own destructive tendencies." Koch felt the weight of those words. The humans acknowledged not only the dangers of the universe, but also the risks inherent in their own nature. At the summit, it was decided that an intergalactic treaty would be established to regulate the use of weapons of mass destruction and encourage diplomatic alliances. The humans proposed a surprising concept: the creation of a network of interdependent coalitions capable of responding rapidly to emerging threats. "It's not just about military power," Lyra explained during a session. "It's about creating a system where no one feels isolated enough to resort to war as their first option." Observing the dynamics of the meeting, Koch noted how the humans led with subtlety. They didn't impose their ideas, but offered practical solutions that seemed to benefit everyone. They don't lead through fear, he thought. They inspire collaboration. When the treaty was signed, many leaders expressed skepticism about its effectiveness, but Calder insisted it's only the first step. Peace is never guaranteed, but it's an effort worth making. Meanwhile, reports of new threats surfaced in distant sectors. Smaller factions, inspired by the Karlak's aggression, were organizing into hostile alliances. Calder decided it was time for Koch to return to Sven space to report his findings and strengthen the ties between their species. Before departing, Koch had one final conversation with the Admiral. "What have you learned here, Koch?" Calder asked, gazing intently at the Sven. Koch paused to reflect before answering. "I've learned that humans don't avoid war out of fear or weakness. They choose restraint because they understand the true cost of conflict. But when forced to act, they do so with conviction and strategy. It's a different kind of strength, but one my species might learn to respect." Calder smiled, satisfied with the response. "And you, Koch? Are you prepared to bring this message to your people, knowing you may face resistance?" Koch nodded. "It won't be easy, but I believe it's a message worth sharing. Perhaps it will plant a seed of change." When Koch returned to Sven space, he was met with distrust from some and curiosity from others. His presentation to his species council was meticulous and passionate. He described how the humans balanced power with compassion, prioritized building over destruction, and found strength in their ability to choose. "They are not perfect," Koch admitted, "but perhaps they are the example we need to navigate this complex universe." The council was divided. Some saw the humans as reckless idealists, while others recognized potential in adopting a similar approach. Harak, a respected veteran, summarized the prevailing sentiment. "Perhaps the humans are right in their pursuit of balance. But is our galaxy ready for it? Or are we forever trapped in a cycle of conquest and revenge?" Back in human space, Calder and Lyra discussed the implications of their recent victories. "Do you think Koch managed to convince them?" Lyra asked, reviewing reports of emerging threats. Calder, ever pragmatic, replied, "It doesn't matter if they accept it immediately. What matters is that the idea has been planted. Sometimes change takes generations." Meanwhile, the newly formed Intergalactic Alliance faced its first challenges. Small conflicts arose among coalition members, testing their ability to work together. True to their philosophy, the humans positioned themselves as mediators, always prioritizing dialogue and cooperation. For Koch, watching from afar, it became clear that humanity's true legacy wasn't just its military strength, but its ability to inspire others. Years later, Koch, now a respected diplomat among the Sven, reflected on his time with the humans. He saw their influence slowly spreading, not through conquest, but through ideas. More species began adopting more balanced approaches, recognizing that true power lay in building a sustainable future. Koch knew the journey would be long, but he believed that one day the galaxy might achieve something close to the vision the humans represented. And so, as the stars continued to shine across the vast universe, the humans carried on their path of balancing strength with compassion. It was not an easy road, But it was the one they had chosen to walk, knowing that true power lay not only in winning battles, but in inspiring a better future. Years had passed since the events that marked the alliance between humans, the Sven, and other galactic species. The galaxy had changed in subtle but significant ways. Intergalactic treaties began shaping a new kind of coexistence among civilizations once trapped in endless cycles of war. Coke, now an influential figure in Sven space, watched with pride the impact of the lessons he had learned from the humans. The intergalactic alliance, though imperfect, endured. Crises arose, but the human approach, patience, restraint, and building trust had taken root among many of its members. Coke, often serving as a mediator in various disputes, frequently repeated the words Calder had spoken years before. Strength is not just the ability to win, but the ability to choose when to fight and when to build. Meanwhile, the humans continued to evolve. Lyra, now admiral of one of the largest human fleets, led with the same strategic vision and empathy she had learned from Calder. "Our galaxy will never be perfect," she often said at diplomatic meetings, "but we can make it better, one step at a time." Under her leadership, the humans solidified their position as mediators and protectors, maintaining a delicate balance between strength and diplomacy. For Coke, the influence of the humans was clear, though he knew there was still much work to be done. At a council of galactic leaders, he addressed the gathered species. "The humans have shown us that power without purpose destroys, but power with responsibility can build. It's not an easy choice, but it's the only one that ensures a future." His message was received with respect, though skepticism lingered among many. Change takes time, Coke thought, but he knew the first steps had already been taken. On Earth, Calder, now retired, observed the galaxy's progress from afar. He knew that humanity's influence continued to grow, not through force, but through the ideas they had sown. In a message to Lyra, he wrote, "The true legacy is not just what we do, but what we inspire. Keep showing the universe what it means to be human." Lyra, upon receiving the message, smiled and replied, "Of course, Admiral. We'll keep showing that true strength lies in choice." Despite the progress, the galaxy remained an unpredictable place. New threats arose, and not every conflict was resolved peacefully. But with each carefully made decision, the human vision gained strength. Restraint and alliance building were no longer just strategies, but a reflection of who they had become as a species. At the end of his career, Coke reflected on the impact humans had had on his life and his civilization. He knew challenges still lay ahead, but he believed in the power of the right choices. If one species can inspire so much change, he thought, perhaps the universe is hope. And so, under the endless stars, humans, Sven, and countless other species continued navigating the delicate balance between conflict and cooperation. Humans had shown that true strength was not just in the ability to destroy, but in the courage to build something better, even in a universe so vast and chaotic. This would be the legacy they left for future generations.